The tale opens within the prison of the Silver Dragon Dungeon, a place watched over by two powerful dragon sentinels. A silver dragon queen named Rosewis arrives, commanding the guards to step away so she can speak privately with the captive. Bound in chains sits the legendary dragon-slaying hero. With a faint, knowing smile, she asks him what it feels like to be imprisoned by the dragon clan. His answer is blunt: he simply wishes to die. Entertained by his desire for a quick end, she steps closer and lifts his chin. Despite herself, she finds it difficult to remain indifferent, as he is both striking in appearance and unyielding in spirit. Gradually, she drags a sharp nail across his face, leaving behind a thin cut, relishing the idea of ruining his flawless features further. He turns away, unwilling to endure more humiliation. She could kill him or rip him apart at any moment, yet all he wants is for it to be over swiftly. Though once immensely powerful, he had been betrayed by a villain, which led to his current miserable condition. The Dragon Queen leans in, licking the blood from his wound, and proposes that he join the Silver Dragon clan. He scoffs at her, questioning whether she is even worthy of his allegiance. Enraged, she lashes him with her tail, sending his body crashing hard into the wall. Standing over him, she presses her foot against his chest, astonished that a mere prisoner would dare to insult her. This man is no ordinary captive. His name is Leon Cosmo, once humanity's celebrated champion, admired by countless people. Now shattered and defeated, he struggles to believe in the greatness he once embodied. His dream of annihilating the Dragon Clan and leaving behind a lasting legacy has completely fallen apart. The Dragon Queen sneers, telling him to accept reality: he will die here. She increases the pressure on his chest, reminding him that any future filled with riches and glory is gone. Without a successor, he will leave nothing behind. Leon warns her not to underestimate humanity. In response, she coils her tail around his neck, irritated by his stubbornness, and tightens her grip as she asks if he is ready to beg for mercy. Leon remains composed and reveals that she made two grave errors from the start. First, she should never have been alone with the strongest dragon slayer. Second, she should never have tasted his blood. In that instant, he activates a forbidden technique known as the blood curse. Startled, the Dragon Queen releases him and steps back. A strange and overwhelming sensation floods her body, and to her horror, she feels an uncontrollable wave of desire take hold. She collapses to her knees, shaking. Leon approaches, his gaze cold and detached, declaring that she will suffer for the rest of her life, a torment that will consume her very soul. Her urges intensify, and before she can resist, she lunges at him, knocking him down. Leon, caught off guard, cannot make sense of what is happening. Overcome by the curse, the Dragon Queen kisses him, leaving him flustered. For the next hour, they are entangled in a strange and intense encounter. Eventually, the effects of the blood curse begin to fade, and her control returns. She pulls back quickly, confusion and anger written across her face, demanding to know what he has done. Leon calmly explains that the blood curse is a forbidden ability that can only be used once in a lifetime. By tasting his blood, she formed a bond between their souls. When he dies, the curse will subject her to endless suffering. She scoffs, still trying to process everything, and questions why the earlier incident occurred if the curse only activates after death. Her cheeks flush with embarrassment as she asks. Leon frowns, realizing there was an unforeseen side effect, something even he did not anticipate. He admits that he believed the pain after his death would be the only consequence, but clearly, the spell holds deeper effects. The Dragon Queen, now blushing, begins to understand the implications. Dragons follow strict laws of monogamy, and the bond created by the curse would seal her fate. After Leon's death, she would be unable to take another mate, have offspring, or explain the situation to her clan. Leon is taken aback by this unintended outcome, recognizing the irony. She had mocked him for leaving no heir, yet now she would share the same fate. She prepares to strike him down, but Leon stops her, telling her it is unnecessary, he will die soon regardless. As his vision fades, he makes one final request, that she live on with hatred for him and endure lifelong pain. This is his final act of vengeance as a human. The Dragon Queen hesitates, unable to deliver the finishing blow immediately. Moments later, Leon breathes his last. She is stunned that a mere human managed to exact such a cruel form of revenge. Still, she refuses to let him have the final word so easily. Using her power, she marks Leon's chest with the emblem of the silver dragon. Leon Cosmo was once a legend, a hero revered by all. At just 5 years old, he killed a savage dog with his bare hands, an act witnessed by a passing master dragon slayer. Recognizing the boy's potential, the slayer took him in as a disciple. By the age of 10, Leon enrolled in the prestigious Imperial Dragon Slayer Academy, and only 4 years later, he graduated as the youngest and highest-ranked student in its history. At only 15 years old, Leon stepped onto the battlefield, cutting down dragons and reclaiming land for the Empire. His reputation quickly spread, and he became known as the strongest dragon slayer, the Empire's shining hope to finally bring the war to an end. However, everything changed when he was captured and enslaved by the Dragon Clan. 2 years had passed since that tragic turning point. Leon suddenly awoke with a scream, his hand instinctively clutching his chest. Slowly, his breathing steadied as he calmed himself. As he looked around, he realized he was in a room he didn't recognize. Confusion filled his mind as he tried to understand where he was. Just then, the door opened, and a small girl walked in. Leon was immediately struck by her innocence and beauty. He blinked, struggling to process the situation. Rising from the bed, he stared at her, her presence so pure that he wondered if she was an angel. Perhaps he had died and ascended to heaven after everything he had done for humanity. But that assumption was quickly proven wrong. "What's your name?" Leon asked, still trying to grasp reality. The girl smiled warmly. "Moine." Her answer oddly brought him a sense of comfort, yet something about her seemed unusual. Her black and white hair was unlike anything he had ever seen. Moine explained that her mother had told her the name meant moon, which only deepened Leon's confusion. Did angels even have mothers? When Leon introduced himself, he was surprised when the little girl excitedly said that his name meant lion. Curious, he asked how she knew that, and she replied cheerfully that her mother had told her. A sense of unease crept over him as he asked, "What's your mother's name?" "Rosvis." Moine answered happily. Leon froze. Hearing that name, everything began to click into place. A shocking realization hit him: he was her father. Moine confirmed it with a bright, innocent smile. Panic surged through him. How could this possibly be? How could he have a child with Rosewis? At that moment, Moine turned toward the doorway, where her mother stood, sending a chill down Leon's spine. "Mama, Daddy's awake," she called, running over to her. Rosewis smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile her daughter believed it to be. Moine assumed her mother was happy, especially since she had visited Leon every day. But as Rosewis gently stroked her daughter's head, a darker, more sinister expression lingered beneath her smile. "Go outside and play, dear," Rosewis said sweetly. "Your father and I need to talk." Once Moine left, Leon stared at Rosewis in disbelief. "Is Moine really our daughter?" "Yes," she replied, closing the door behind her with her tail. "She's our biological child." Leon's thoughts raced wildly. "Why did you have the child?" he demanded. "Why did you save me?" Rosewis revealed that Leon had been unconscious for 2 years. She hadn't forgotten what he had done to her, and she had no intention of letting it go. Anger flared within Leon. He insisted he never meant for any of it to happen. "We're different," he said through gritted teeth. "We can't coexist. I would never have touched you if things were different." Seeing the anguish in his eyes, Rosewis's expression darkened. "Oh, so it was torture for you," she responded coldly. She wrapped her tail around his leg and yanked him back onto the bed. Climbing over him, she tore open his shirt and, with a chilling look in her eyes, activated a spell. She intended to carve her own dragon mark onto him, binding him to her forever. Leon begged her to stop, but she pressed her hand against his chest, and a glowing magic circle appeared. This mark would become his eternal disgrace. From that moment forward, he would be her prisoner, bound to her with no hope of escape. If his former allies ever saw the dragon mark on his body, they would believe he had betrayed them and willingly submitted to the Dragon Clan. Leon couldn't comprehend why she would go this far. The nature of dragon vengeance had long puzzled human scholars. It wasn't merely extreme, it was obsessive, relentless, and beyond human understanding. For the Dragon Queen, simply defeating him wasn't enough. She wanted him to live in shame, to endure humiliation for the rest of his life. As the spell took effect, Leon felt a powerful, uncontrollable desire rising within him. For the Silver Dragon Queen, breaking Leon, the greatest dragon slayer in human history, and turning him into her servant, her closest companion, was a matter of pride. Now fully under the spell's influence, she climbed on top of him, deciding it was time to claim him completely. Back at the Silver Dragon Castle, even the maids noticed that the queen seemed unusually cheerful. Rumors spread quickly throughout the castle. The Dragon Queen's husband had finally awakened. Hearing this while hiding nearby, Leon was stunned. She had openly declared him as her husband. None of them truly understood how terrifying she was. She had spent an entire day and night with him, leaving Leon's body nearly broken. His waist felt as though it had been completely shattered. Furious, Leon swore to himself that he would not remain here as her plaything. Quietly, he slipped out of his room and made his way toward a side exit of the castle. But 4 dragon guards stood watch, blocking his path. Escape was far from easy. He also noticed something strange. The castle was eerily quiet, with far fewer guards than there had been 2 years earlier. Something about the situation felt off. As Leon tried to figure out a way past the guards, he came across a concealed hole in the grass. Moving quietly, he approached and noticed a faint light coming from the other side. Though uncertain whether it was a trap, he chose not to hesitate. Escape was his only priority. Even if danger awaited, he would push through it. Without a second thought, Leon began crawling through the cramped tunnel. As he did, he muttered a sarcastic goodbye to the Twisted Dragon Queen. As for little Moine, despite how charming she was, he knew he had to leave her behind for now. Meanwhile, on a balcony, Moine ran excitedly to her mother, announcing, "Father is digging a hole for the dog." The Dragon Queen, lounging casually in a bikini while sipping wine, chuckled at Leon's boldness. Moine then eagerly asked, "When are you going to fish him back?" Rosewis lightly corrected her, saying that fish sounded rude and that she should say catch him back instead, a sly grin forming on her lips. Though confused, Moine nodded in agreement. As night fell, Leon finally escaped the castle and sprinted into the nearby forest. He knew that if he could reach the mountains ahead, he would be able to spot the border of human territory. After hours of running, Leon began to feel confident that the Dragon Queen wouldn't catch up. But suddenly, the sky darkened, and she appeared above him in her true dragon form, praising his speed. Seeing her, Leon cursed under his breath and ran, but Rosewis swiftly descended and blocked his path. To his surprise, she wasn't angry. In fact, she looked pleased. "Well done, Leon," she said with a sinister smile. She revealed that she had deliberately distracted the guards and even left the tunnel for him to find. Though Leon had suspected a trap, he hadn't expected her to catch him so quickly. Returning to human lands with the Dragon Queen's mark branded on his chest meant no one would ever see him as a dragon slayer again. But Leon no longer cared. He resolved to live as an ordinary man, believing that was far better than remaining her captive. Noticing his continued defiance, the Dragon Queen spread her wings, irritated that he failed to appreciate what she considered kindness. Grabbing him in her claws, she carried him into the sky, heading toward human territory. After 3 hours of flight, night had fully settled in. She released Leon near a border city of the Empire, sending him crashing through trees before hitting the ground head first. Though dazed, his pain faded when he realized he was close to a human settlement. The Dragon Queen, now back in her human form, confirmed they were within the Empire's borders. For most, seeing a familiar city would spark hope, just one step away from returning home. But for Leon, that hope felt distant and out of reach. Suddenly, the mark on his chest began to glow. The Dragon Queen had failed to mention something important. When one of the two bound by the dragon mark felt desire, the other would be forced to respond. As she touched his chest, an intense heat and uncontrollable urge surged through him. She had brought him here to make him face his humiliation within sight of his homeland. But Leon refused to break. Grabbing her arm, he chose to endure and wait for the right moment to strike back. He swore that one day he would repay her twice over for every bit of humiliation she had inflicted. The Dragon Queen, both surprised and amused, smiled and accepted his silent challenge, saying she would wait for him, whether he lived or died. As the moon rose, the two moved to a tree near the border city. Bound together by the mark and their bitter rivalry, they remained there for hours in a heated and complicated encounter. By the end, the Dragon Queen was completely satisfied. Leon, on the other hand, was utterly drained, both physically and emotionally, quietly shedding tears as his strength and pride were worn down. As she touched the mark on his chest again, she casually decided that from now on, she would bring him back to his hometown every month for more of these encounters. Lost in her own thoughts, she began imagining new ways to further break him. Eventually, satisfied for the time being, she announced it was time to return. After all, their daughter was waiting for them at home. But Leon, though weakened, still retained a fragment of his resolve. He stopped her, refusing to be taken back like prey. As a dragon slayer, he chose to continue on his own, clinging to the last scraps of dignity he still possessed. The Dragon Queen lifted an eyebrow and pointed out that at her flying speed, the return trip to the Silver Dragon Castle would take only 3 hours, whereas a human like Leon would need 10 days, possibly even half a month, on foot. Even so, Leon stubbornly insisted on walking, telling her not to underestimate human endurance. Amused by his determination, the Dragon Queen smiled, curious to see just how long he could keep it up. Before long, Leon's pace began to falter, his exhaustion becoming obvious. She followed quietly behind him, waiting for the moment he would admit defeat so she could simply carry him back. But even as he neared collapse, Leon refused to give in. With a teasing smirk, she mocked him, saying, "The only thing tough about you is your mouth." At that moment, they noticed several knights from the Dragon Slayer army patrolling nearby. Hope surged in Leon's chest. These men might be his chance to escape. However, the Dragon Queen immediately sensed his thoughts, her aura turning cold and dangerous. With a single warning look, she made it clear, if he called out, she would kill him without hesitation. One of the knights approached them, politely asking if they were lost. Thinking quickly, Leon lied and said they were just taking a walk. Deep down, he couldn't bring himself to drag innocent people into his complicated situation. The knight dismounted and introduced himself as the captain of the 47th Squadron of the Imperial Dragon Slayers. He warned them that the jungle was dangerous, filled with hostile creatures, and kindly offered to escort them. Leon panicked, his hands trembling as he thanked the captain but insisted they could handle themselves, claiming they had some self-defense training. In truth, he didn't want the captain anywhere near them. The captain studied Leon more closely, as if recognizing him, which immediately put the Dragon Queen on edge. Her eyes narrowed as she quietly began gathering her power, ready to eliminate him if necessary. Realizing things were about to spiral out of control, Leon acted fast. He grabbed the Dragon Queen's hand and pulled her close, forcing a nervous smile as he told the captain he must have mistaken him for someone else. He joked about having a very common face, adding that even his wife sometimes confused him for others, gesturing to the Dragon Queen. Leaning in, he whispered urgently, begging her to play along and promising that if she helped him get rid of the knights, he would obediently return with her. Entertained, the Dragon Queen decided to indulge him. The two put on a convincing act, with Leon holding her close as if they were a loving couple. The captain, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden display of affection, gave an awkward smile and excused himself, choosing not to interrupt what appeared to be a private moment. Once the knights were out of sight, Leon quickly let go of her. The Dragon Queen looked visibly annoyed, and he immediately stepped back, realizing he had overstepped. "You were wise not to call for help," she said coldly. "But don't misunderstand, just because we have a child together doesn't make me your wife." Still catching his breath, Leon replied, "I never intended to be your husband." The Dragon Queen smirked, satisfied with his response, and turned away, reminding him that they still had a long journey ahead. However, before they could continue, a sharp pain shot through Leon's hand, and within moments, he collapsed unconscious. Watching him fall, the Dragon Queen sighed, amused by how fragile humans were. Without hesitation, she transformed into her dragon form, gently lifting him in her mouth before placing him on her back. Taking his collapse as an unspoken surrender, she spread her wings and flew toward the Silver Dragon Castle, pleased with how everything had turned out. The next day, Leon awoke inside the castle to find little Moine sitting beside him. Confused, he wondered how he had ended up there. Moine cheerfully explained that her mother had brought him back. It didn't take long for Leon to realize the truth. He had finally been captured like prey. Looking down at his hand, he saw it had been carefully bandaged, tied neatly with a small bow. Moine proudly took credit, explaining that she had done it herself, clearly hoping for praise. Smiling gently, Leon stroked her head, struck by how different she was from everything dragonologists had claimed about dragons. They were supposed to be violent, raised in bloodshed from a young age. Yet Moine showed no such cruelty. Despite her dragon nature, she treated him with warmth and kindness, like a daughter would. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because she was a human-dragon hybrid. He patted her head affectionately and said, "Moine, you're very cute," before adding playfully, "but when you grow up, don't be like your mother." From the doorway, the Dragon Queen's voice suddenly cut in, sharp and unmistakable. "And what's wrong with being like me?" Leon froze, startled by her sudden presence and the realization that she had heard everything. Flustered, he tried to change the subject. Meanwhile, Moine eagerly showed her mother the bandaged hand, proudly explaining that she had followed her instructions perfectly. The Dragon Queen remained distant and unyielding, offering no words of praise. "That's exactly what you're supposed to do," she said coolly. Moine simply nodded, already accustomed to her mother's strict demeanor. Trying to ease the tension, Leon gently patted Moine's head again. "Why don't you go hide in the garden?" he suggested. "I'll count to 100, and then I'll come find you." Moine's face instantly brightened at the idea of playing hide-and-seek. Excited, she ran off toward the garden. As she disappeared, Leon glanced at the Dragon Queen and muttered under his breath, "I'm definitely nothing like her mother," before beginning to count. Once Moine was gone, Leon turned back to the Dragon Queen and questioned why she treated her so harshly. Sitting on the bed, she calmly explained that dragons were raised under strict discipline from an early age to shape them into powerful warriors. Leon argued that Moine wasn't a full dragon, and besides, she was adorable. The Dragon Queen scoffed, insisting that Moine was indeed a dragon, and that being called cute was actually an insult to their kind. Leon admitted that he found the Dragon Queen herself quite cute as well, but that remark only irritated her further. In an instant, she grabbed him by the front of his shirt, reminding him sharply that he was nothing more than a slave meant to absorb her frustrations, and that he had no right to outshine her. Leon acknowledged her authority, and her mood seemed to soften just a little. After all, she was the ruler of the Silver Dragon clan, weighed down by countless responsibilities. Because of that, she assigned him the task of looking after Moine. Leaning close, she whispered in his ear that Moine liked him. Feeling overwhelmed, Leon wandered off toward the fountain, wishing he could escape the burden of caring for a child, especially given that he was a dragon slayer. As he stood there, he suddenly noticed Moine hiding behind a pillar, clearly thinking she was well concealed. Pointing toward her, he called out, "I found you." But she didn't move. Concerned, he wondered if she might be upset. Apologizing for taking too long, he was startled when she suddenly bolted away. Leon immediately chased after her, calling out, "Why are you running?" Moine darted around a corner, and Leon lost sight of her. He found it difficult to understand a child's behavior and began to see why the Dragon Queen had entrusted him with this responsibility. Just as worry began to creep in, Moine suddenly appeared behind him and hugged him tightly, catching him completely off guard. Confused, Leon recalled seeing her run ahead of him. But Moine insisted that wasn't the case. Since he hadn't found her, she had come out to find him instead. Still puzzled, Leon assumed he must have been mistaken. Taking his hand, Moine eagerly urged him to follow her, saying she had something special to show him. At that moment, another girl who looked just like Moine stepped out from behind her, silently watching them from a distance. Later that day, when the fountains were turned on, Moine happily shook her head in excitement as she worked on her drawings, completely absorbed in her fun. Sitting behind her, Leon smiled softly, feeling an unexpected warmth. The thought of having a daughter brought him a sense of peace, something he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, it seemed like his soul was beginning to heal. Yet as Moine played, Leon quietly clenched his fists, determination filling him. He decided that he needed to find a way to escape the Dragon Queen's control. Just then, Moine ran up to him, excited to show him a drawing she had made of their family. Smiling, Leon reached out, ready to praise her. But as he looked closer, his expression shifted to shock. The drawing showed 2 children. Assuming it might just be a mistake, he pointed at the second figure and asked, "Why are there 2 children?" Moine smiled gently and replied, "That's my older sister." Hearing that Moine had an older sister, Léon felt a surge of panic. It quickly dawned on him that the girl he had glimpsed earlier wasn't his imagination. The child he had seen in the garden must have been her. He regretted not calling out to her, realizing she might have felt hurt because of it. However, Moine reassured him, saying her sister wasn't upset, she was simply shy about meeting their father. Resting his chin on his hand, Léon fell into thought, realizing that he had never met this older sister before. It was only natural that they didn't recognize each other, they had never even met before. Still, the day felt unusually bright, and Léon couldn't shake the suspicion that the Dragon Queen was to blame for keeping such an important secret from him. Determined to get answers, he set out to confront her directly. Meanwhile, inside the Silver Dragon Castle, the Dragon Queen had made her way to the library. As she quietly read through a stack of letters, a small messenger dragon arrived carrying another message. Just then, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed outside. Both she and the little dragon turned their attention toward the door. Moments later, it swung open as Léon stormed in, his anger unmistakable. Calling out to her, he demanded her attention while she calmly slipped the letter back into its envelope. Maintaining her composure, she asked what he wanted. Léon stepped up to the table and explained that while playing with Moine, he had discovered she had an older sister. He pressed her, asking why she had never told him about this other daughter. The Dragon Queen smiled faintly, seeming more puzzled by his reaction than anything else. Suddenly, Léon slammed his hand down on the table, his resolve firm. He even went so far as to thank her for her hard work, remarking that he hadn't expected her to have 2 children and that it must have taken considerable effort. He added that when he eventually returned to the Empire, he would include her name in his family tree. The Dragon Queen remained calm, a subtle smile lingering on her lips as she asked whether he understood why she had kept her older daughter a secret. Léon guessed that perhaps she was jealous of how close he had grown to Moine. The thought caught her slightly off guard, especially his eagerness to meet Noah. Unlike her own cold and disciplined approach to parenting, Léon seemed determined to build a genuine bond with his child. With a gentle smile, the Dragon Queen decided to grant his wish, though she warned him to think carefully about what he was asking for. As evening approached and darkness settled in, Léon headed to the kitchen with a determined smile. Picking up a knife, he began chopping carrots. Today, he intended to show the Dragon Queen a different way of doing things. His first step toward connecting with his eldest daughter would be through food, something warm and comforting. He began preparing a rich meat stew with cream, a dish he used to make back when he was with his team. Everyone who had tasted it before had praised it highly, especially for its slightly sweet flavor that children tended to love. Scooping up a spoonful, Léon tasted the stew and nodded in satisfaction. He hadn't lost his touch. Clenching his fist with renewed determination, he imagined Noah smiling and telling him how much she loved her father's cooking. He believed that this meal could help bridge the gap between them. As he continued stirring the pot, 2 maids peeked in through the window, watching him with curiosity. One of them couldn't hide her excitement. Léon had only recently recovered from a serious illness, yet here he was, cooking for his family. To them, he embodied the image of a devoted husband, someone who truly cared for his home. At that moment, the Dragon Queen entered the kitchen with her 2 daughters, while Moine cheerfully greeted the maids. Wanting to create a more relaxed atmosphere for the meal, the Dragon Queen instructed the maids to take a break. They bowed respectfully and complied. Soon after, Léon finished preparing the meal and brought the steaming stew to the table just as the Dragon Queen stepped into the dining area. Drawn by the rich aroma, little Moine rushed over excitedly. Smiling warmly, Léon said, "I heard you both like meat, so I made something special just for you." Deep down, he hoped the dish would convey his sincerity, especially to Noah. However, to his surprise, Noah showed little interest in the food. Her eyes wandered, seemingly distracted and indifferent to the meal in front of her. Léon was left stunned, unsure how to react to her lack of enthusiasm. Nearby, the Dragon Queen watched with a knowing smile. Seeing this, Léon's frustration began to rise once more. Léon quickly realized that the Dragon Queen had expected this exact reaction, which explained why she had been so hesitant to let him meet Noah in the first place. Since it was their first encounter, the Dragon Queen prompted Noah to introduce herself. Obediently, Noah spoke. "I am Noah, the eldest daughter of the Silver Dragon Queen, Roswing. I am 1 year and 2 months old." Dragons were a long-lived species, and their young matured far more quickly than human children. Wanting to make a good impression, Leon stepped forward and extended his hand. "I'm your dad," he said, introducing himself with cautious warmth. To his surprise, Noah seemed almost captivated by him. Still, he couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling beneath her gaze. Something about her distant demeanor made him uneasy, and he began to wonder if she held any resentment toward him. Sensing the awkward silence, Muan gently tugged at Noah's arm and whispered to her, encouraging her to speak so their father wouldn't feel uncomfortable. However, Noah's response struck Leon deeply. "He seems very weak. I'm not sure he's really our dad." Her words hit him like sharp arrows, forcing him to confront the harsh reality of his situation. It became clear that this was the first real challenge in his new role as Papa Leon. Wiping his face with a cloth, he reflected on how severe things had become, even suspecting that his own daughter might be testing him. Despite everything, he steadied himself, preparing for what lay ahead. Noah, with a firm and unwavering expression, rejected something outright, making it clear she would not back down. Whatever she was refusing, her resolve was absolute. The family soon gathered around the table in an elegant dining room. A quiet tension lingered in the air as they exchanged subtle glances, with Muan silently seeking support. The two sisters sat side by side, their resemblance obvious, yet their personalities couldn't have been more different, even in silence. Noah focused on eating, while Muan remained lively and talkative. With a gentle smile, Leon looked at Noah and asked if she liked the meal, his voice filled with care and curiosity. Suddenly, the calm atmosphere shattered as Noah let out a loud cry, causing Leon to recoil in shock at the unexpected outburst. Watching everything unfold, Roswise covered her mouth, clearly amused by the situation. Noticing her mother's reaction, Muan curiously asked why she seemed so happy. Leon, trying to ease the tension, laughed along and shared how being surrounded by family brought him happiness. Muan's eyes sparkled with excitement as she asked if their father would join them for dinner every day, hope evident in her expression. But Noah, wearing a serious look, immediately shut down the idea, making her stance unmistakably clear. Confused, Muan asked why her sister didn't want them to eat together daily. Their mother, remaining calm, questioned why Noah was in such a rush to join a prestigious academy meant for dragons. She wondered aloud what was driving her daughter's urgency. With confidence, Noah declared that she wanted to defeat even more dragon subordinates, her determination shining brightly. Meanwhile, Leon wiped his face again, stunned, beginning to realize that she might even aim to surpass him one day. Concerned, he gently warned her about the dangers of fighting powerful dragons, especially given how young she was. Irritated, Noah crossed her arms and insisted she wasn't a child, much to her father's frustration. Roswise, however, supported her daughter's eagerness, agreeing that starting her training early was the right path. Roswise believed that starting early would better prepare their daughter to face dragon subordinates in the future. Turning her attention to Leon, she questioned whether he had any real reason for trying to stop their daughter's education, subtly challenging his stance. Frustrated, Leon thought it over and realized that if he kept opposing Noah's ambitions, it would only push her to challenge him even more. In the end, he let out a resigned sigh, choosing to drop the argument for now. Though clearly displeased, he admitted that he understood the situation. In his mind, however, he couldn't shake the feeling that Roswing was treating everything like a psychological game, trying to overwhelm him mentally. With a faint smirk, Roswise warned him to be careful, reminding him that decisions about their daughter's future would be made quickly, something that only added to his stress. Noah was then informed that the Academy's entrance exam would take place in a month, and that her father would personally help her prepare. She agreed eagerly, her enthusiasm unmistakable. As dinner came to an end, the family chatted playfully about how full they were, teasing one another in a light-hearted way. Suddenly, Roswise called out in a serious tone, drawing someone's attention nearby. Leon gestured toward the table, pointing out that the dishes were still left uncleared, expecting someone to take action. Calmly, Rosways replied that such chores were meant for others, brushing off his concern. Leon countered by saying that a proper family meal should end with both husband and wife cleaning up together. He subtly questioned whether she truly wanted to maintain a harmonious family image for their children, or if it was all just for appearances. One of the children watched eagerly, clearly hoping for Rosways' approval. After a brief pause, Rosways reluctantly agreed, her expression still composed. Brimming with excitement, the child immediately volunteered to help, her energy infectious as she reached out to join in. Noah, however, was suddenly pulled along, confused and struggling to keep up with her sister's enthusiasm as they all moved into the kitchen, where the dishes sat piled in the sink. Inside, Rosways turned to Leon and bluntly asked when he planned to help. Crossing his arms, Leon reminded her sternly of something he had told her 2 years ago. Unmoved, Rosways declared that she had no intention of dealing with someone who had undergone such intense training, her body radiating power. Standing firm, Leon demanded to know what she was planning, his tone sharp, no longer the man who could be easily manipulated. Without warning, Rosways launched an attack, warning him not to think he could escape so easily. Leon caught her strike effortlessly, gripping her and smirking. "Who said I was trying to escape?" he replied. Rosways let out a pained groan, struggling as Leon mocked her inability to retaliate, calling her a fallen queen. He smugly explained that the dragon's mark had weakened her, comparing her to a helpless kitten while revealing knowledge he had gained from her tribe's ancient texts. Shock flickered across her face as he continued to taunt her need for control. Breathing heavily, her face flushed, Rosways demanded that he release her tail, revealing that he had restrained her. Holding it firmly, Leon spoke in a calm yet threatening tone, accusing her of trampling on his dignity ever since he first woke up. His smug expression clashed with her vulnerable state as she glared at him with fury. Refusing to submit, Rosways lashed out verbally, calling him a bastard and challenging his dominance, her emotions boiling over. She stared at him in disbelief, clearly shaken by his bold defiance. Meanwhile, out in the hallway, 2 maids whispered among themselves, wondering if the queen and her family had finished their private time, sensing something unusual. Curious, they peeked into the kitchen, only to find it spotless, every surface gleaming as though it had been thoroughly cleaned. They speculated whether the prince was responsible for the unexpected tidiness, one of them happily holding up a polished plate in admiration. Back inside, Leon stood quietly, maintaining control as he held Rosways in place. He warned her to stay silent to avoid being discovered, mocking how far she had fallen into such a vulnerable position. The door shut firmly, and Rosways' eyes burned with anger and determination, revealing her internal struggle against the humiliation. Leon smirked, tightening his grip as he mockingly referred to her as his wife and suggested they begin. His expression hardened into something cold and resolute, showing complete control of the situation. Rosways, exhausted and helpless, barely reacted, appearing resigned. 3 days later, the scene shifted to the bright and majestic castle under a clear blue sky. The 2 sisters stood beside their father's bed, worried since he hadn't woken up for 3 days. One feared he might be dead, but the other calmly suggested they wait a little longer. Suddenly, Leon stirred, only to be kicked in the face. Groaning in pain, he reacted to the unexpected blow. Noah, her foot still pressed against him, casually remarked that their father wasn't dead yet. Startled and hurt, Leon questioned whether any child should treat their parent that way. As he regained consciousness, he found himself lying in bed with Moine eagerly watching over him, clearly having waited for this moment. Delighted, she announced that he was finally awake, while Noah observed quietly nearby. Confused, Leon wondered when he had even fainted. Slowly sitting up, Rosways calmly offered to help him remember what had happened. A flashback surfaced. He recalled being struck hard by her. He also remembered how the dragon mark on him had lost its power after that night, leading to the painful moment he was knocked unconscious. Reflecting on it, Leon realized just how ruthless she could be, and how easily she could have killed him if he had been any weaker. Now sitting silently on the bed, he watched Rosways as she stood with her back turned to him. Despite her overwhelming strength, he couldn't help but notice her beauty, realizing she was a dragon who had lived for over 200 years. Noticing his silence, Moine wondered aloud why he wasn't moving, guessing that he was simply stunned by their mother's presence, hinting at the awe she inspired. Just then, a sudden udar nearby caught Rosways' attention, her expression shifting in surprise. Leon bent down, picking up a flower accessory from the floor, and gently placed it on her, remarking that it suited her. Caught off guard, Rosways questioned whether he had ever done something like that for another woman. Leon chuckled and casually replied that when he was younger, he used to groom his master's donkey, claiming that gave him some skill. Hearing this, Moine looked up at him with innocent curiosity and asked what a donkey was, leaving him momentarily speechless. Smiling warmly, Leon explained that donkeys were somewhat like dragons, just much smaller, stubborn, and prone to making humming noises when they were upset. To make his point, he even mimicked a donkey's behavior, which amused Moine greatly. Nearby, Rosways observed quietly, noting how a donkey's stubborn nature wasn't all that different from her own. Suddenly, Leon flinched in fear as Rosways struck him, sending him staggering backward. Clutching his stomach, he winced in pain, but when Moine asked if he was all right, he forced a reassuring smile and told her he was fine. Without missing a beat, Rosways assigned him a new responsibility, teaching the girls how to write, declaring that Leon would handle it. Caught off guard, he realized he had been given the task without any say in the matter. Moine cheered excitedly at the idea of their father teaching them, while Noah confidently stated that she already knew how to write. The two sisters then ran off toward the study room, eagerly chatting about which colorful pens they wanted to use. Meanwhile, Rosways informed Leon that her sister would soon be visiting and made it clear that she did not want him showing himself in front of her. Surprised, Leon questioned why he was being told to stay out of sight, voicing his frustration about not being allowed to meet her family. In response, Rosways reminded him that he was now considered part of the Silver Dragon clan, and that he had been in a coma for 2 years due to a mysterious illness. She explained that he had only recently awakened, emphasizing how complicated his situation truly was. She went on to warn him that if he were ever forced to meet her sister, he must stick to the false identity she had created for him. Stressing how important it was to maintain this story, she spoke firmly while Leon listened, still trying to process everything. With a serious expression, he acknowledged her instructions, respectfully addressing her as Your Majesty. After she left, Leon stood alone, questioning whether he would really follow her orders. Instead, he began plotting ways to embarrass her in front of her sister. The scene shifted to the children's study room inside the Silver Dragon Castle. There, Leon sat at a table, patiently teaching Noah and Moine how to write their names. He demonstrated each step carefully while they watched. After writing examples for them, he asked the girls to practice by copying his handwriting. Moine looked excited, while Noah remained serious and focused. Examining Leon's writing, Noah remarked that it wasn't as good as their mother's, subtly revealing her high standards. Leon felt a flicker of irritation at the comparison, sensing the pressure to live up to her expectations. When Leon stood up to leave, Moine asked curiously where he was going. He replied that he had forgotten to deliver something to their mother and assured them he would return to check on their progress later. His casual tone made Noah doubt how serious he really was. Moine teased her sister, suggesting she seemed happy, but Noah quickly denied it and urged her to focus on practicing instead. Still, she lowered her gaze slightly, a faint blush appearing as she grew momentarily thoughtful. The scene then shifted to the grand gates of the Silver Dragon Castle, where soldiers and important figures had gathered for a formal occasion. Standing among them was Isha Melki, the Red Dragon Queen, her striking red hair and regal attire making her presence impossible to ignore. Rosways hurried forward to embrace her sister, their close bond evident in the warmth of their reunion. The two greeted each other with genuine joy after being apart for so long. Isha Melki complimented her sister, noting how lively and radiant she looked compared to their last meeting. Rosways seemed slightly taken aback and modestly brushed off the praise. Curious, Isha asked about Rosways' husband, having heard that he had finally awakened. She wondered why she hadn't been allowed to meet him yet. Rosways explained that her husband was still unwell and unable to receive visitors for the time being. Disappointed, Isha admitted she had been eager to see what kind of man the Dragon King who kidnapped her sister looked like. With a teasing tone, she hinted at their relationship, suggesting that their sudden marriage and child might indicate a strong bond between them. Rosways immediately grew defensive, firmly rejecting the idea that marriage and children equated to a good relationship. She made it clear that she had never been attracted to her husband, neither in the past nor in the future. Isha smirked at her response, commenting on her sister's toughness and noting that her strong personality hadn't changed at all. Changing the mood, Rosways cheerfully suggested they take a walk through the garden to talk, and Isha agreed, allowing her to lead the way. The two sisters strolled side by side, smiling as they enjoyed each other's company. Meanwhile, from a distance, Leon watched them through a telescope, recognizing Rosway's sister. He observed them carefully, gathering information as he studied their behavior. Determined to test the limits of the dragon mark, he wanted to see just how far its power could reach. As Isha and Rosways walked through a beautiful garden filled with blooming roses, they discussed the growing instability within the dragon clan. They noted that the Red Flame Dragon King had been unusually active lately, which raised serious concerns. Rosways was visibly startled when the name Constantine came up in relation to the unrest. She questioned her sister, recalling that Constantine had been missing for years. Isha speculated that he might be taking advantage of the current chaos to expand his territory. Suddenly, Rosways reacted in shock, her body beginning to glow with energy as something unexpected started to happen. Her eyes widen as she becomes aware of something strange unfolding around her. Picking up on the shift in her sister's behavior, Aisha asks what's wrong. Rosways quickly waves it off with a reassuring smile, insisting that nothing is out of place and urging her sister to keep talking. Even so, Rosways can't stop her thoughts from drifting to the Dragon Slayer, recalling past encounters. Inwardly, she mutters in frustration about Leon, calling him a damned Dragon Slayer. Clearly annoyed by his actions, Isha's expression turns serious as she suggests reinforcing the border defenses. She adds that she'll send someone named Shinlong to stay in contact in case anything new arises. Rosways suddenly senses something again and grows alert, lost in thought. Aisha notices the change and asks once more, "What's wrong?" Trying to brush it aside, Rosways replies, "It's nothing, sister. Please, go on." But internally, she curses under her breath, thinking, "Damn, Dragon Slayer." Isha continues, emphasizing the need to strengthen the borders and mentioning she'll arrange for someone to keep her informed of any developments. Lightly amused by the dragon pattern, Isa comments on how casually the younger generation seems to toy with it. Meanwhile, Leon lounges comfortably in a chair, wondering how long Rosways can withstand the effects of the dragon pattern. All of a sudden, the door swings open, and Rosways storms in, visibly upset. She grabs Leon by the collar, accusing him of intentionally triggering the dragon pattern to humiliate her in front of her sister. Noticing her anger, Leon immediately decides to act innocent. He gazes at her with a soft, pitiful expression, locking eyes with her. "Is it wrong for me to want you?" he asks. Caught off guard, Rosways releases his collar, her face flushing as red as a tomato at his unexpected confession. Embarrassed, she quickly covers her face with her hand. Leon smiles inwardly, surprised that his act seems to be working, and wonders if she might at least feel repulsed by him now. Blushing deeply, Rosways turns away and calls him shameless, reminding him that he's merely a defeated prisoner who has no right to speak such nonsense. She orders him to put aside his indecent thoughts. Leon stays quiet, wearing a calm smile, while Rosway steals a glance at him, her face still flushed. In her mind, she questions herself, "I came here to confront him, so why did his words throw me off?" She leaves with a mix of anger and embarrassment, warning him that he was lucky this time, but if he tries anything like that again, she won't let it pass. Leon, with a teasing glint, thinks sarcastically about how terrified he is, amused that just a few words could leave her so flustered. He reflects on how powerful the dragon pattern truly is. As he pauses, his face warms, and he notices his heartbeat quickening whenever he thinks about her. Regaining his composure, he mutters, "Cosmode, wake up. Stop thinking such nonsense." He reminds himself that the children are still waiting for his return. Still, it's becoming obvious that both he and Rosway are starting to develop feelings for each other, signaling a turning point in the story. In the study room, Noah practices writing with focus and determination, while Mwan, slacking off nearby, wonders aloud why their father hasn't returned yet. Meanwhile, the relationship between Leon and Rosway continues to evolve, bringing new twists and unexpected developments. Later that night at Silver Dragon Castle, Aisha bids farewell to Roswis, saying she'll be leaving that very night. Roswis waves back, reminding her sister to stay safe on her journey. Aisha then transforms into her red dragon form and teasingly asks Rosweiss to let her meet her husband next time. Rosweiss agrees, promising they'll have more time to talk. As Aisha, accompanied by her knights, flies back to her own castle, Rosweiss watches her departure with a thoughtful expression. "I thought there would be trouble this time," she reflects. "But Aisha's departure wasn't quite what I expected. Who knows what lies ahead for this family and their mischief?" With a firm, serious look, Rosweiss clenches her teeth and stares forward with determination.